Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu, and I have a very special guest today, Colin Duff. He is the CEO of Mosaic Innovation. It's a consultancy that helps leading enterprises such as the big name brands HP, Marriott, crack their toughest growth challenges, build capability, and transform their culture. So today's talk is going to be all about innovation, creating a culture for innovation, leadership, and I'm really excited for this show. So, Colin, welcome.
Oh, delighted to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know, especially in today's times, organization culture, innovation is really key. It's really competitive business landscape, a lot of uncertainty. Tell people how you got started, and we'll get into it.
My backstory was I just wanted to do business. I'd never heard about innovation and certainly not innovation consultancy. So I was working in a big boring energy company, and these really cool consultants come in the fancy clothes with these crazy ideas and wacky approaches. And I just said, I want to do what they do. So I kind of begged to get into that field. And I read a lot of books, which only helped so much because innovation, people say it's an art and a science, and you almost need to have a certain swagger around it, and then you can bring the theory in unless you go down the academic route. So started in a kind of wacky, more creative consultancy, and then I grew up a bit and went to the big four to see how they did innovation, and everyone does it slightly differently. And then since then, I've moved around a bit, and I've worked just in the medical field. How do you sell more Viagra to guys over in Russia? To how do you improve the state healthcare system in the UK? Lots of other pharma and related challenges as well. But I guess they've all got in common. It's all about how do you motivate people to do things in new ways. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And so we'll get right into it. I love this idea of the consultants because I went into consulting as well, and I was like, yeah, it's great. You get to paid well. You get to feel like you're always different city and different place. Um, what's interesting is especially this well, creating a culture for innovation to thrive. What is the with what is the current business landscape? Why do we have a cult? Why do we hinder innovation? Companies such as the FANG companies really innovation. So tell us more.
Big question. And if you ask, I think almost every executive or almost anyone will say innovation's a top priority. And you look at the failure rate, and it's usually 80% plus, depending on the sector and what type of innovation. And the real reason? Okay, there is some inherent risk in it. It's because people do it really badly. Now, one of the issues is few people have been classically trained in innovation in the same way you might be in finance or another function. So you've got all these people that maybe about a half a day's training course going and doing it. And, valiant efforts. But innovation, I would argue, is very much as much a science and a discipline as an art. So you've got people who talk a lot about philosophy and not a lot about substance. So there is method to the madness, and you can systemize it. And I guess I'd say one of the biggest barriers to innovation still is if you work in the field, you hear a lot about human-centered design or design thinking. And put simply, that just means rather than think about the business interest, let's think about solving people's problems, and that will lead to a better result. But what most people still do, if I'm honest, is they look at their spreadsheet and say, how can we grow average order value? How can we cross-sell? How can we do this? So they almost approach it from an internal money perspective rather than a customer value perspective, despite saying the opposite. They've been smart enough not to say that. And that leads to a lack of innovation. And the other big one is a lot of people are confusing digital transformation, which is really just modernizing systems. So if you're a bank, for example, adding biometric security to your app and saying that's innovation. Now, it might have been once, but to be innovative, it needs to have two things. It needs to be novel, ideally for the sector, but certainly for the company, and generate value, which is usually financial, can be customer experience or brand. And it fails that novelty test. So what everybody's really good at is identifying stuff with value. What they're not so good at is how do we get new news and novelty. And I could talk all day about how you get there. The one other observation I have is people have get very good at brainstorming. Now, brainstorming is very cheap and it's fun. We'll all go in a room for half a day or a day. We'll have these wacky ideas, throw some post-its around, get some Haribo or some other exciting sweets. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to innovate more strategically, you need to identify, right, where are the big opportunities? And the best way, there is nothing beats that than observing people. So great innovation insight is more like a story than a statistic. If it's in the stats, it's probably going to be quite incremental. People are already aware. If it's something like Airbnb, the statistics, what was the market for the room share market? It was close to none. But if you spoke to them, they had experienced the early stages, the buzz around it was phenomenal. So it's about going out and seeing and observing things. And it's much easier than it sounds. There was a good example. I was doing a project for Honda once to make generators for camping, fairgrounds, etc. And they were convinced they needed an app. Everybody wants an app. And the first observation I had, I went out with a lady who was running a candy floss stand. She pushed this big machine along and it got stuck in the grass. And the first thing I said, well, why are the wheels so small? And that was a category. Every single player in the market had these tiny little wheels. Or there's another example from Netflix, and someone asked a really stupid question. Why do movies go to the cinema and then come on TV? And everyone was like, duh, that's the way it is. But he's like, but why? And Netflix challenged that. So, there's a mindset and habitual way to be more innovative, and then there's some more deep method ways to do it as well. And, we can all be more innovative every day, as well as do some of the big breakthrough stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. When we talk about, for example, when you talk about, creating the culture and, leadership with and overcoming barrier. Now talk about like, for example, we brainstorm, we test, but translating ideas into innovations, testing business ideas. Tell us more how you can get those ideas, into the product market cycle.
And you've hit the nail on the head, Chris, right? Because what people do when they say we've got to be more innovative, they do what I call the sugar rush, right? Loads of brainstorming, maybe a foosball table of an ideas contest, right? Hackathon, great. What typically happens is you galvanize everybody temporarily. The ideas don't really go anywhere. And then people become cynical and say, well, management never listen or it's a waste of time. So you really want to think about what not to do as well is don't get loads of ideas, and this is how most people do it. And then the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion trumps. So almost like Julius Caesar, where they put the thumbs up or down to say, with innovation, once you've identified a few high potential ideas, what you want to do is test them quick and dirtily, as quickly and dirtily as possible. So there's a method I'll not go into detail called the lean startup. And that's all about thinking about, can we identify areas of uncertainty? Now, contrary to what most people assume, the uncertainties, can we do it technically? Do we have the science? The uncertainty is usually a market-based one. Do people actually want this? So often you'll say, oh, I'd definitely buy that. Then you wouldn't. So it's how can you simulate sales, for example? So that might be, I had a friend who wanted to do, there's in the UK, a new injection to make you slim. And he's a GP, so general practice doctor. And he said, I might just run off and set up this cool new business. And I said, hold on, before you throw away your career and your life savings on this, what evidence do you have? How can you get some early smoke signals? So what we did for him is we threw up quite a quick and dirty landing page. We put some really cheap ads on social media, on LinkedIn actually as well. We even went to some events and just seen how many people actually inquired about this service. Now, when we did, because he didn't actually exist, he emailed and says, look, I'm sorry, the service is still in development, but come back in a few months. And that was enough to tell him in this instance, there wasn't the demand there and he didn't throw his career. But so many people are making these big, bet the house decisions on a hunch, or on, okay, we've built some elaborate financial model, but dozens of unproven assumptions, which is, you hire any consultant to build your financial model, they'll give you the number you want. If, we need X million to make this worthwhile, guess what? We'll hit that hurdle rate. So much better to say, give me real world evidence, right? And the fidelity of that evidence will increase over time. So in the first instance, speaking to a few friends and family, nothing wrong with it. But very quickly, like week 2, I'd be looking for you to have much broader qualitative insights. And soon after that, show me some quantitative stuff. Show me some skin in the game. Who's actually gave you a letter of intent? Who's put some money in? Who's clicked at least on the page and given you an email? Those are better indicators that we can actually do this. So if people want to find out more about how to experiment, the Lean Startup, which is one of the biggest business books, it might not be as familiar if you're in the medical field, but that will explain it in a lot of detail.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love these ideas with lean startup. And so one thing is talking about how to talk about, basically especially in this day where tech companies are hiring based on skill, and talk about, for example, hackathons and code boot camps. How do innovation hubs work?
So the type of innovation dictates the structure. Okay, so if you're wanting to do quite, let's call it efficiency-driven innovation, so how do I just make things cheaper or better customer experience or incremental? Don't go near a hub. You want the people close to the front line doing it because they've got the best knowledge. Now, if you're looking to do more what we call breakthrough innovation, so it's like the next wave of technology, you might want to take people out because the mindset, skill set, and activities all differ. And then there's a final type of innovation, sorry to confuse you again, called disruptive. So this is where you want to almost shake things up and maybe provide like a cheaper, simpler solution. And if you're doing that, you want those people external because the big mothership will always crush people that's trying to destroy your current business. So the classic example is Kodak, when the developer said, I've come up with this really cool digital camera. And they said, but we sell film. We're not going to do that. So it was just sidelined. So if it threatens your existing business, put it at arm's length, even literally in a separate building, separate people. If it's breakthrough technology, you probably want some kind of centre of excellence, innovation hub. Now, what I see with these people, though, is you need to give them quite a short leash. So what everyone loves is have 2 years to just have some fun, find stuff out, be in what they call discovery, right? And promise jam tomorrow. We're going to generate millions or billions, but it's always a few years out. Now, I'd be saying you need to demonstrate traction. And in order to do that, you want your innovation hub to say, right, let's pursue some short-term stuff that can add business value, medium, and maybe some longer term. So classically, we talk about maybe a 70-20-10 portfolio, and that's how most companies operate. So 70% of the innovation, we're going to try and do something in the next 2 years, but 20%, typically it's 2 to 4, and then the last 10%, 5 years out. And that'll influence, are you looking for existing technology? Is it going to be more cutting edge or bleeding edge tech as well, right? So something like the metaverse is still, I would argue, a bad example where they bet the house in Mark Zuckerberg's ego on this unproven crazy tech. Although you might counter argue now that Apple's launched this cool product, maybe it's about to open up. But yeah, that's how you usually structure, is have a balanced portfolio of different kinds of risk.
Yeah, fascinating. Fascinating conversation. One thing is, what's people are curious, what's the difference between innovation and digital transformation?
Yeah, so I mean, digital transformation is really taking what you do today and looking at essentially how can we improve upon it with usually a kind of like next generation technology that will make it more efficient, that will improve the customer experience. And the reason it's not innovation, usually it might start off as innovation, is because typically it becomes fairly industry standard. So it just becomes best practice. So if you see anything and you say that's best practice, 9 out of 10, it's going to be digital transformation. If it's novel, at least for your sector, then you can say it's probably more innovation. Now, sometimes there's a bit of a fine line and you say, okay, it's a bit incremental or both. But I was working with a big tech company. They said, we've got 300 innovations we're doing this year. And I said, wow, that's lots. we went through the list. I said, you've got about 5 innovations, right? The rest are just so mundane. Are you opening up new segments or markets? Are you solving different types of customer problems? Are you significantly transforming the customer experience? Like, there's a whole bunch of diagnostic questions. And I'd say, even instinctively, if it feels sexy, you can kind of tell it's innovation, versus if people are saying, is that innovation? It probably it isn't a lot. They're never telling anyone they're not innovating. It really pisses people off. So I never say that isn't innovation. I just say, oh, it's.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. How can people contact you, follow you, check you out on social media, etc.?
So we're on mosaic-innovation.com, and that is my business. There's a small team of us, and we have a bunch of toolkits and resources. So if you're interested in creativity, there's one in problem solving, or the other great one, my favorite, is innovation insight. So how do you find new news? So particularly if you're a physician and everyone is doing stuff the same, how do you unlock those insights that will trigger the breakthrough ideas? And it usually almost comes from, we've identified a new customer problem, or how do we look? There's another great method in innovation called the 10 types of innovation. I'd encourage your users to Google it. And it talks all about, it's almost like the Lego building blocks. So if you've never done innovation and you want to paint by numbers, 10 types of innovation gives you 100 tactics. There's even a nice little plain deck of cards. So you can actually almost deal yourself a hand and think, how could I change my business in interesting ways?
Yeah. Yeah. And for all the audience out there listening, Colin, for coming out to the show, really interesting, talking about innovation, cultural transformation. All of his resources will be in the links and show notes. And with that, thanks so much for coming out to the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure, Christopher. Thanks.